When you look at the landscape of pop music over the last 30 years, there are very few acts that can claim the kind of statistical dominance we are about to examine today.
That is exactly right. I mean, we are looking at a group that has sold over 55 million records worldwide.
Which is a number that is, frankly, hard to even visualize.
It really is. If you were to stack those records physically, the sheer mass of the plastic and the vinyl would be overwhelming. And it is crucial to remember that we aren't talking about streaming numbers here, where a 30-second listen automatically counts as a unit.
Right. This was an era of physical media.
Exactly. We're talking about physical sales, people getting in their cars, driving to a retail store, and deliberately purchasing an album with their disposable income.
And it isn't just the sheer sales volume that warrants our attention. The consistency of the accolades is what truly stands out when you review the raw data.
Definitely. I mean, we are analyzing a group that holds 4 Guinness World Records. They have secured 2 Brit Awards and 4 Record of the Year awards in the UK.
And in their home country, the dominance is even more absolute.
It is unparalleled. 11 #1 albums and 16 #1 singles in Ireland. That puts them in a very elite tier of musical history, regardless of the specific genre you are looking at.
They also have 34 top 50 singles in Ireland. It is a level of market saturation that is extremely rare in the modern music industry. We are, of course, talking about the Irish pop group Westlife.
Yes, Westlife is our primary subject today, and the goal of our analysis is to look well beyond the surface-level narrative of a standard pop vocal group.
Because it is much more complex than just catchy choruses.
Far more complex. This is a comprehensive case study in brand management, resilience in a notoriously fickle industry, and the mechanics of sustaining a career when the primary medium of music consumption fundamentally shifts.
From CDs to downloads to streaming and now even integrating artificial intelligence.
Precisely. We are mapping a timeline that stretches from their formation in 1998 all the way through to their professional activities in early 2026.
That encompasses nearly 3 decades of relevance,
Wow.
which, in the pop music world, is essentially several lifetimes.
It bridges 4 distinct decades, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and now firmly into the 2020s. And to be clear for everyone listening, we are basing this discussion strictly on documented accounts of their history, their official discography, and the verified touring data.
It is a massive timeline to cover, so we should establish the origins. We need to go back to 1997 and 1998. It begins in Sligo, Ireland.
It does. And the roots of this global brand are actually quite humble and very localized. It all starts at Summerhill College in Sligo. You had 3 of the future core members, Cian Egan, Mark Feely, and Shane Phelan, who were all schoolmates.
And Sligo is on the west coast of Ireland. It isn't a major metropolitan entertainment hub.
Right. It is not Dublin. It is not London. So for a global pop phenomenon to emerge from a single secondary school in a provincial town like that, it is statistically improbable right from the very start.
They were performing in a school production of Grease, according to the records.
That was the genesis point. They were in Greece alongside 3 other local Sligo men. That was Derek Lacey, Graham Kefron, and Michael Garrett.
So it was initially a 6-piece group.
Yes. This group of 6 formed a local vocal pop act initially called 6 as 1. It is a very classic origin story, really. School friends realizing they have a shared vocal talent and trying to make something of it on a local level.
They later renamed themselves to IOAU.
Correct. And we have to highlight a key figure at this early stage, Mary McDonough. She was a local choreographer and manager who had actually spotted Cian Egan as a 6-year-old student in her dance classes.
So she had a long history with them.
She did. She knew Phelan and Feely from their early teens because they starred in various local theater shows, things like Oliver and Godspell for the Sligo Fun Company. So Mary, along with 2 other informal managers, helped guide this early iteration of the group.
They even managed to release a single under Sound Records.
They did, a track called Together Girl Forever. So they had a single out, they had management, and it seemed like they were genuinely on their way.
But then they encountered the reality of the international music industry. Shane Phelan's mother, May Phelan, made a pivotal phone call.
She contacted Louis Walsh. Now, Louis Walsh was the manager of Boyzone, who were an absolute juggernaut at the time. Boyzone had essentially written the blueprint for the Irish boy band success story in the mid-90s.
So May Phelan reaching out to him elevated them from a local act to a potential professional investment.
Exactly. That connection led directly to a showcase for Simon Cowell. And this is where we really see the ruthless nature of the music business in the late 90s.
They performed for Cowell, hoping to secure a BMG record deal.
Yes. You have to picture the scene. You have these young guys, very confident in their local success, performing for one of the most powerful A&R executives in the world, and Cowell's reaction was, it was brutal.
The assessment he gave was not based solely on their vocal ability.
Not at all. Cowell told Lewis Walsh, and I am quoting the historical record directly here, he said, "You are going to have to fire at least 3 of them. They have great voices, but they are the ugliest band I have ever seen in my life."
That is an incredibly harsh assessment.
Yeah.
Stripping away the musical art completely and focusing entirely on aesthetic marketability.
It was an absolute ultimatum. It highlights the stark commodification of the artist during that specific pop era. Cowell was looking for a poster for teenage bedrooms, not just an audio cassette.
He demanded a visual reconfiguration.
He told Walsh that if they wanted the record deal, the lineup had to change immediately. And that is exactly what transpired. Derek Lacy, Graham Keelan, and Michael Garrett were formally told they would not be part of the new group.
So 3 original members were cut simply because they did not fit the visual mold Cowell required.
It underscores how precarious success can be in this industry. So to fill those vacancies, they held auditions in Dublin.
And that is where Nicky Byrne and Brian McFadden were recruited.
Yes, that finalized the core lineup that the public would come to know. This newly configured group was officially formed on July 3, 1998.
It was essentially a manufactured adjustment applied to an organic, local group.
Exactly. You had the Sligo core of Shane, Mark, and Cian, and then you bolted on the Dublin editions of Nicky and Brian to round out the visual and vocal dynamic required by the label.
They initially called themselves Westside.
They did, but they were legally forced to change it to Westlife because there is already an existing band operating under the name Westside.
The management structure was also formalized at this point.
Yes, you had Louis Walsh, obviously, but they also strategically brought in Ronan Keating from Boyzone to act as a co-manager.
Attaching an established star to a new, unproven act is a very clear branding strategy.
It was brilliant from a marketing perspective. It gave them instant credibility with the target demographic. Ronan Keating was the face of Irish pop success right at that moment. By attaching him directly to Westlife, it signaled to the fans and the British press that this new group was the official heir apparent.
Financially, they started from a very strong position. They signed a £4 million deal with RCA Records,
which is a massive, massive initial investment for an unproven act. It shows how confident the label was in the manufactured formula.
Their first major live appearance was supporting Boyzone and the Backstreet Boys in Dublin.
Yes, in 1998. And their national television debut followed shortly after on The Late Late Show in November 1998.
Moving into 1999, they released their debut single. And this is where the commercial statistics start to become quite extraordinary.
April 1999. They released Swear It again. It immediately topped the charts in Ireland and the UK for 2 consecutive weeks. But the metric you really have to look at is the initial sales velocity. It was the biggest selling single in the first week by a debut artist.
They didn't have a slow build to success.
They arrived with it. It instantly validated Cowell's ruthlessness and Walsh's management strategy. They followed it up in August 1999 with If I Let You Go,
which also hit #1.
Yes, and that established a historical record. They were the first boy band to hit #1 with their first 2 singles.
Then came Flying Without Wings in October.
Their third #1, and it won them their first Record of the Year award. Flying Without Wings is a critical piece of their catalog because it transcended the typical boy band demographic. It became a cultural standard.
It was also featured in Pokémon the Movie 2000.
That placement is massive. It exposed their music to a global youth demographic instantly. The Pokémon franchise was at its absolute global peak at that specific time. Being attached to that cinematic release put their music in front of millions of children and teenagers in international markets they hadn't even begun to tour yet.
Their debut album, titled Westlife, was released in November 1999.
It reached #2 in the UK and #1 in Ireland. And there is a fascinating statistical footnote about that album's chart performance in the UK later in its run.
It holds a record for chart volatility, correct?
It does. In its 58th week on the chart, it leaped from #79 all the way to #3 before plummeting down to #37. It was officially the biggest chart dropper in the top 40 UK music history.
What does that volatility indicate about their consumer base?
It speaks to the intense, event-driven nature of their sales. When the band did heavy promotion, their highly organized fan base reacted instantly and sales spiked vertically. When promotion ceased, it dropped just as fast.
It shows a highly reactive, mobilized fan base.
Exactly. Now, we must discuss December 1999, the race for the Christmas #1.
Which is a massive cultural phenomenon in the UK and Ireland.
It really is unparalleled in other global music markets. It is the most coveted chart position of the entire calendar year. Westlife released a double A-side single. It was I Have a Dream, an ABBA cover, and Seasons in the Sun.
And it secured the 1999 UK Christmas #1 spot.
Yes, this was their fourth #1 single. Achieving 4 #1s in a single calendar year is a statistical anomaly in the UK singles chart. They are one of only 5 acts to ever accomplish that.
They also became the only male band to have every single released from an album reach #1 in the UK.
That level of dominance is what distinctly separates them from their immediate peers. Other bands had massive hits, but Westlife essentially held a monopoly on the top spot during this period.
They maintained that momentum into 2000 with the release of their second album, Coast to Coast.
Coast to Coast was their first #1 UK album, and the context of this release is vital. They were directly up against the Spice Girls' Forever album.
The Spice Girls were a global institution at that point.
They were the biggest girl group in the world. This was a widely reported chart battle by the British media, heavily framed as a heavyweight fight between the reigning champions and the new challengers.
And Westlife beat them by a considerable margin.
A very large margin. It signaled a definitive changing of the guard in British pop music. Coast to Coast went on to become the UK's 4th biggest selling album of the year 2000.
This album included the song My Love.
Yes, My Love was their 2nd Record of the Year award winner. It is a quintessential Westlife track, emotional, heavily melodic, featuring their signature key change at the end.
But there is a very stark, documented fact about this specific song that contrasts sharply with its musical intent.
Yes, and it is a rather dark piece of their historical record. The song My Love was controversially utilized by the Central Intelligence Agency as part of a torture program in Afghanistan.
This was detailed in a report by the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU.
That is correct. The ACLU reported that the music was pounded constantly as part of a scheme to assault prisoners' senses.
It is a staggering contrast. A song deliberately engineered to be a gentle, romantic pop ballad being deployed in a sensory assault program.
It really highlights the unpredictable journey of cultural artifacts once they are released into the world. The artist entirely loses control over how their work is utilized. The operational theory behind it was that the juxtaposition of a sweet, repetitive melody played at excruciating volumes on a continuous loop would eventually break the psychological resistance of the detainees.
Returning to their commercial trajectory, the early 2000s saw them actively expanding their global footprint.
They had significant success with tracks like I Lay My Love on You and When You're Looking Like That in territories outside of the UK and Ireland.
They were moving immense volume in Asia.
Over 2.5 million units in the Asia-Pacific region alone during this phase. This is precisely where the foundation for their long-term career longevity was poured. While breaking the American market remained elusive, they were systematically conquering Europe and Asia.
In 2002, they released their third album, World of Our Own.
And this era gave us Uptown Girl.
Their cover of the Billy Joel track.
Yes, which became their very first million-selling single in the UK. Covering established songs became a highly effective strategic part of their business model. They understood how to take a familiar standard, apply their specific vocal harmonies and modern production values, and successfully introduce it to a completely new generation of consumers.
This period from 2001 to 2003 required an extreme physical workload.
It was an industrial-scale operation. They achieved a Guinness World Record for the most public appearances by a pop group in 36 hours.
What were the actual logistics of that record?
They executed stop-offs in 5 different major cities: Dublin, Belfast, Edinburgh, London, and Manchester, all within a strict 36-hour window to promote the album.
The physical or logistical toll of that schedule must have been immense.
You have to factor in the flights, the aggressive press lines, the live performances, getting back to the airport and repeating it. It demonstrates that their market dominance was not accidental. It was driven by a grueling promotional schedule that very few other musical acts were willing or able to sustain.
The sales figures reflect that raw effort.
They sold over 12 million records in a span of just 3 years, releasing an album every 12 months, touring globally, and doing relentless promotion in between.
But operating at that velocity inevitably challenges the stability of any group.
You cannot run an engine at that RPM forever without something giving way. And that brings us to March 2004, the departure of Brian McFadden.
This was the first major structural turning point for the brand.
On March 9th, 2004, Brian McFadden officially left the group. The official reason cited to the press was a desire to spend more time with his family.
Which is a very standard industry line.
It is the standard diplomatic statement, but it usually masks a deeper operational fatigue or simply a desire for creative independence. McFadden reverted to the spelling of his first name as Brian with an I. He had been using Brian with a Y for the band's marketing, and he launched a solo career.
The timing of his departure was incredibly difficult for the remaining members.
It was just 3 weeks before they were scheduled to embark on their massive turnaround tour. The behind-the-scenes disruption would have been monumental. The stage choreography was set for 5 people. The vocal harmonies were intricately arranged for 5 voices.
Suddenly, you have to restructure the entire live show for a quartet.
Usually, when a prominent member leaves a highly successful boy band, it signals the beginning of the end. You look at Jerry Halliwell leaving the Spice Girls or Robbie Williams leaving Take That. It traditionally marks an irreversible commercial decline.
But Westlife managed to navigate that transition without losing significant commercial momentum.
Which is a genuine rarity in this specific genre. They immediately pivoted their management strategy. They did not attempt to cast a replacement for McFadden. They simply redistributed his vocal parts among the remaining 4 and tightened their public image. They presented a highly united front.
This pivot leads directly into what we can categorize as their covers and concept albums era.
Precisely. In late 2004, they released an album titled Allow Us to Be Frank. It was a Rat Pack-inspired record.
That is a very clear signal to the market that they were deliberately maturing their sound.
They were no longer solely targeting the teenage demographic. By covering Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, they were solidifying their status as a mature vocal harmony group. It told the audience, we are adults now.
They executed a very specific promotional campaign for this album called The Perfect Fan.
They held televised X Factor-style auditions to find a dedicated fan to actually record a track with them. They selected Joanne Henley, and she recorded The Way You Look Tonight with the group.
It seems like a strategic way to maintain deep listener engagement during a vulnerable transitional period.
It was brilliant. It made the core fan base feel like they were actively participating in the new chapter of the band rather than mourning the loss of a member.
Then, in 2005, they experienced a massive commercial resurgence with the track You Raise Me Up.
This track is arguably one of the most vital components of their long-term career survival. You Raise Me Up was their 13th #1 single, and it secured their 4th Record of the Year award.
It was the lead single from their 2005 Face to Face album.
The song was originally recorded by Secret Garden, but Westlife completely localized it to their sound. It fits perfectly into that subgenre of inspirational pop that completely transcends standard age demographics.
They also secured a major collaboration on that Face to Face album.
A duet with Diana Ross on the song When You Tell Me That You Love Me.
Having an artist of her caliber agree to collaborate is a major validation of their industry standing.
It definitively elevated them above the standard boy band label. They were now operating as peers with legacy industry legends. They followed that momentum with the Love album in 2006.
Which was a concept album focused entirely on love song covers.
This era also saw them signing a lucrative new 5-album deal with Sony BMG. They were expanding their touring markets quite aggressively at this point. They pushed heavily into South Africa and did major arena touring across Australia.
And during the Back Home era in 2007, they performed in New Zealand for the very first time.
They were filling massive arenas globally. It empirically proved that operating as a quartet had not diminished their international live draw in the slightest.
So they successfully stabilized the brand. By 2008, they were celebrating their 10th anniversary in the industry.
They staged a monumental concert event titled 10 Years of Westlife at Croke Park in Dublin on June 1st, 2008.
Croke Park is a venue with immense cultural weight in Ireland.
To headline a show there is the absolute pinnacle of success for any Irish artist. Following that massive event, they strategically took a 1-year hiatus.
A necessary operational pause.
It allowed them to physically and creatively recharge, and when they returned in 2009 with the album Where We Are, they maintained their presence. They also participated in the high-profile Haiti charity single Everybody Hurts in 2010.
There is a significant Guinness World Record from this specific period regarding their decade-long performance.
In 2010, the Guinness Book of World Records officially named them the top-selling album group of the 21st century in the UK.
That is an incredible statistic.
They moved 10.74 million physical albums in the UK in that decade alone. They outsold Coldplay, they outsold U2 in that territory. It was pure album volume dominance.
However, the internal operational relationships were beginning to shift. In March 2011, they announced a major departure.
They confirmed they had officially parted ways with Simon Cowell after 13 years and his label Seco Music after 9 years.
This was a separation from the executive who essentially constructed them.
It was a massive industry shift. Nicky Byrne gave a very telling quote to the press regarding the split. He stated that the group felt they needed a manager who was on it all the time,
suggesting that Cowell's attention was divided.
Cowell's television empire had grown exponentially with formats like The X Factor and American Idol. The implication was that Westlife felt they were being treated as a passive legacy act, while they still viewed themselves as a high-priority current act requiring active management.
Shortly after that management shift, in October 2011, they announced the official split of the group.
The definitive end of the initial run. They announced a massive farewell tour scheduled for 2012. And the logistical scale of these final shows was staggering.
They concluded the tour at Croke Park again.
Over 2 nights in June 2012, they played to 187,808 spectators.
That is the equivalent of a medium-sized city gathering just to watch a pop act conclude their career.
They also utilized a novel distribution method for that final show. It was broadcast live to cinemas. It screened in over 300 cinemas across the UK and 200 additional cinemas worldwide,
allowing global fans who could not secure physical tickets to participate in the concluding moment.
Financially, it was incredibly lucrative. They were the 34th top-grossing touring act globally for the year 2012, generating $35.2 million. So they concluded their primary run at the absolute peak of their earning power.
And for 6 years, the brand remained dormant. The members pursued various solo endeavors.
Nicky Byrne transitioned into radio and television broadcasting. Kian Egan won the reality series, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Mark and Shane both released solo studio material, but Westlife, the corporate entity, was inactive.
Until October 2018, when they formally announced their return.
The cultural nostalgia cycle had rotated to the point where market demand was exceptionally high again. They signed a new recording contract with Universal Music Group and Virgin EMI.
The question that frequently arises regarding this reunion is whether Brian McFadden was involved.
He was not, and the boundaries there were very clearly defined. McFadden was quoted in Closer magazine explicitly stating, "I only met the guys when I joined the band and have no regrets about leaving."
So it was a completely clean break.
Strictly the 4 members who had sustained the brand: Shane, Mark, Kian, and Nicky. By this point, they had successfully operated as a 4-piece for significantly longer than they ever did as a 5-piece.
They released a new studio album titled Spectrum in 2019.
The lead single was Hello My Love, which dropped in January 2019, and this is where their ability to adapt is highlighted again. The track was written by Ed Sheeran and Steve Mack.
It updated their sonic profile for the modern streaming era.
It was an upbeat contemporary pop record. They promoted it heavily across major platforms like The Graham Norton Show and Dancing with the Stars Ireland.
And the commercial performance validated the reunion.
Spectrum reached #1 in Ireland, Scotland, and the UK. It definitively proved they were not returning merely as a heritage act playing legacy hits. They were an active group charting brand new material at the summit.
Then, the global pandemic disrupted the entire live entertainment industry.
Their planned stadiums in the summer tour was entirely postponed due to COVID-19, but they utilized that downtime to restructure their business deals. In 2021, they signed a new distribution deal with Warner Music UK and East West Records.
They also executed a highly innovative digital event during this period.
This is a fascinating data point regarding their global reach. In December 2021, they performed a digital concert that was broadcast exclusively via Tencent's WeChat platform in China.
And the viewership numbers were immense.
It was viewed live by almost 28 million people.
28 million concurrent or total viewers for a single stream.
It perfectly highlights the massive, enduring appeal of Western vocal groups in the Asian market. To contextualize that figure, that is more than the entire population of Australia logging in to watch a single digital concert. It demonstrates that while their cultural footprint may have shifted in Western markets, the digital reach in the East was actively expanding.
That brings our timeline into the very recent operational period, looking at developments from 2023 through to early 2026.
In late 2023, they finally announced a dedicated North American expansion. For the first time in their entire career, they scheduled official tour dates in Brazil, Canada, and the USA for March 2024.
They played major markets like Toronto, Boston, New York City, and Chicago.
It was a long overdue commercial acknowledgement of a massive North American fan base that had been quietly importing their physical CDs and streaming their music for over 20 years.
However, this expansion coincided with a significant personnel setback.
In February 2024, Mark Feehily had to announce a temporary operational departure due to severe health issues. He had been battling pneumonia and facing complications from an ongoing surgical recovery.
So the group was forced to continue as a trio.
They honored the American tour dates and the subsequent With Love tour in Asia as a three-piece. This was a massive logistical challenge. Mark possesses a very distinct, powerful lead vocal that defines many of their biggest hits.
Adapting the entire live arrangement for three voices required serious professional resilience.
Moving further into 2024, they continued to leverage their popularity in the Asian market, specifically integrating new technology.
In July 2024, they initiated a unique collaboration with Tencent Music.
They released a specialized AI single titled Love Plus Courage. This was a cover of a track by a popular Chinese artist, Johnny Zhang.
But they utilized artificial intelligence to assist with the production.
They used AI technology to bridge the linguistic gap, assisting with the vocal processing and production specifically for the Chinese release. It was strictly a regional release, but it generated over 1 million streams in its very first week.
It shows a willingness to experiment with emerging technological tools to service specific regional markets.
Moving into 2025, the brand marked its 25th anniversary. In June 2025, they formally announced the 25th Anniversary World Tour, initiating with a residency at London's Royal Albert Hall.
The Royal Albert Hall is a venue associated with prestige and legacy.
It frames the tour as a cultural celebration, and during this period, they received high-profile public support from Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran has historically been quite vocal about his appreciation for their catalog.
In July 2025, he invited the group on stage during his own stadium gig in Ipswich to perform Flying Without Wings together. That live collaboration led directly back into the recording studio,
resulting in the single Chariot, which was released in October 2025.
Chariot was co-written by Ed Sheeran alongside members of the rock band Snow Patrol. It was a strategic move that connected them to a current generation of elite songwriters while preserving their core vocal identity.
Which brings our analysis to the events of early 2026, specifically the release of the album 25, The Ultimate Collection, on February 13, 2026.
This project serves as a comprehensive, career-spanning retrospective. But there are two highly significant details regarding this specific release that warrant attention.
First, regarding the vocal arrangements on the newly recorded tracks.
Mark Feehily's vocals are prominently featured on the new material despite his ongoing touring hiatus. This confirms to the market that he remains a foundational part of the recording unit.
And the second detail involves the visual marketing of the album itself.
The official cover artwork for the album explicitly features Brian McFadden,
even though his operational departure occurred 22 years prior, in 2004.
It is a fascinating executive choice. For over 2 decades, the tightly controlled brand narrative has focused exclusively on the 4 remaining members.
Putting Brian back on the primary artwork alters that narrative.
It suggests a comprehensive, retrospective acknowledgement of their entire history, embracing the founding era regardless of the subsequent professional separation. It packages the band as a complete, unified entity from 1998 all the way to 2026.
Before we conclude the timeline, it is important to analyze their public image and the strategic non-musical aspects of their career profile.
From a corporate perspective, they have been a highly reliable investment. They have secured massive sponsorships over the decades from brands like Tato, Calvin Klein, Adidas, and Volkswagen.
They project a clean, reliable, controversy-free image,
which means major international brands feel entirely secure investing capital into the Westlife demographic. And that demographic is incredibly broad, which is reflected in the high-profile private engagements they have secured.
They have performed for some of the most prominent global figures.
They were contracted for £2.5 million to perform a strictly private concert for the Sultan of Brunei. They have been invited to perform at the Nobel Peace Prize concert on 3 separate occasions.
They have performed for Queen Elizabeth II and for Barack Obama.
And they actually hold a very unique historical distinction regarding Vatican City. They were the very first pop band to ever top an entertainment bill at the Vatican, performing for Pope John Paul II.
That highlights the unique crossover appeal of their specific catalog.
Much of their pop music carries an underlying spiritual or highly inspirational tone, which grants them access to perform in cultural and institutional spaces where a traditional pop act would be entirely inappropriate.
This public image is also heavily supported by extensive philanthropic work.
They've consistently utilized their platform for charity. They have served as dedicated ambassadors for the ISPCC, the Irish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children.
They were deeply involved in the Helping for Haiti charity single.
They dedicated their Uptown Girl release to the Comic Relief charity. They have also actively supported the Irish Blood Transfusion Service. It is a consistent pattern of aligning the brand with established, respectable, charitable organizations.
Finally, there is a statistically notable sociological aspect to their music that we must document.
It is a somewhat morbid metric, but it is culturally highly significant. Their specific ballads are statistically ubiquitous at funerals across the UK and Ireland.
Songs like You Raise Me Up and Flying Without Wings consistently rank at the top of national lists for requested funeral music.
It speaks to the deep emotional utility of their product. Their music provides a sense of comfort and a specific type of auditory grandeur during moments of intense human emotion. They have successfully soundtracked both massive celebratory events and profound moments of grief.
Looking at this entire timeline, spanning from the school play in 1997 through to the Ultimate Collection in 2026, what is the core factor behind their longevity?
The defining factor is ruthless adaptability. They successfully engineered a transition from a manufactured teen pop group in the late 90s to a highly respected adult contemporary vocal act.
They navigated massive shifts in the industry's infrastructure.
They survived the total collapse of physical CD sales, the uncertain transition into the streaming era, and the intense fragmentation of modern media. They absorbed the loss of a founding core member, navigated severe health crises, and managed complex executive transitions.
They recognized early on that their true product was the reliable consistency of the brand itself.
They are absolute survivors in an industry designed to discard acts after a single album cycle. And looking closely at that 25 The Ultimate Collection cover artwork, featuring all 5 original members, it leaves you with a compelling thought to consider.
Does that visual inclusion signal a genuine retroactive personal healing of the group's complex history?
Or is it simply a highly calculated commercial acknowledgement that the corporate brand of Westlife ultimately supersedes the individuals involved?
Yeah.
It is a powerful testament to the sheer weight of the entity they built, starting in that small school hall in Sligo.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.